People ask Reddit. Have you ever had sex with a person within the first hour of meeting them, and if yes, how was it? Not sure if this counts. Met a woman on ICQ, chatted, she flew to meet me. Had sex as soon as we left the airport. Was pretty much sex from leaving the airport till taking her back to the airport. We swore it was only sex. We have been married 22 years now. About 16 years ago I had sex with a girl at a party less than 15 minutes after meeting her. I showed up already buzzed from a few drinks and immediately started chatting with this beautiful blonde girl named Stephanie. We were totally into each other and the drinks made me braver than normal. I looked her in the eyes and whispered, "Do you want a duck?" Somehow that worked. She said yes, and we ended up in my friend's bathroom in the complete darkness having amazing dirty sex on the floor. We tried to find a bedroom, but my buddy said absolutely not. We hooked up a few times after that, but it never really went anywhere. We are still social media friends, but now we are both parents with very different lives. A few times. Most recently with Tinder matches. 1. We talked about our records for quickest hookup and agreed to break our records. We were naked with my D inside her mouth within 2 minutes of her arriving at my hotel. The second was a few months later. A match asked me my record and I told her. She was disappointed that record would be hard to break, so we altered it by saying, "What if we don't speak from the time we meet until after we finish?" She greeted me at her door in her robe, looked me up and down, motioned for me to come in, started to walk to her bedroom and dropped her robe along the way. Lay back on the bed and we got down to business. Laughed and introduced ourselves after. Both were fun experiences. Just communicate what you want with the women and find something fun for both of you. Multiple times from dating apps, usually going straight to one of our houses. Yes, amazing. We're now engaged. Best first date ever. Met her at a bar. Told her I was getting a few beers before going on the boat. She said she wanted to come but didn't have a swimsuit. I said if I could watch her try them on I'd get her one. Ducked in the changing room. I didn't have a boat. FWB asked me to pick up her cousin from the airport a few weeks back and I got out the car to give her a hug. I was wearing PJs and the dick hole for the pants was unbuttoned. She sat in the passenger seat and I put her bags in the trunk. When I got back to the driver's side she reached over and opened the door for me, and I didn't realize my dick was poking out and she kissed it. I quickly sat in the car and she just smiled at me. It gave me roadhead the whole ride home. She's still here and we hook up often. My FWB doesn't care, but no chance of a threesome. The first time I tried a guy. Went to his house, he manhandled me as soon as I entered the door, he ducked me real good and I left immediately. Went home and ducked my GF. Crazy night. It wasn't an hour but wasn't much more. We started talking on OkCupid the night before. I arranged to pick him up, bring him back to mine and get down to it. We ended up talking for a while and then got down to business. It's been over 3 years since that night and now we live together and have a dog, so overall went pretty well. I've also had a girl over and pretty much just got straight to it. That was fun too. We met at a party. She asked if I was so-and-so's friend. We small talked for a couple minutes before she asked if I wanted to go back to her dorm room. We went a few rounds and then another in the morning before I left. Would have been my only one night stand except that we ran into each other at the grocery store a few weeks later and hooked up again. I met her at an unsanctioned freshman event while in my first year of college. I was slightly buzzed, probably like 6 deep after a few hours, and I was drinking with my parents for the longest time, so I knew to pace myself and be responsible. And I think she was 3 to 4 drinks deep. We weren't really having fun, so decided to go back to her dorm room. We made out for a while fully clothed and she was petty grabby with my D. She eventually got me naked and gave me a handjob and we had a sleepover. No PIV sex was involved that time, but we did start dating. Many times and it's usually good. Couple of times not so much, but good for the most part. Yes, we both just kind of knew it was going to happen. She was super wet, but had a shallow pussy. She came and begged me to keep going. She started spotting when I started going hard and I stopped. We became good friends, but I decided we were physically incompatible. I met a girl at a high school conference when I was a senior in high school. We were in a room alone together and, within about 10 minutes of talking, she started stripping for me, and we started making out. But we got interrupted. We went our separate ways and didn't talk for the rest of the day. Then we ran into one another at a dance later that evening. We danced together for about 5 minutes before we headed back up to the room we were fooling around in earlier. It didn't take long before she stripped for me again, we started making out again, and this time, nobody interrupted us, and we ended up banging on the floor. So, we had known each other for less than an hour, but the hour was broken up over about 5 hours. That was the last time I ever saw that girl, and it was my only hookup. Every other time I had sex after that, it was in a relationship. Yes, and he was Brazilian and couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't speak a word Portuguese either. I only remembered a few Spanish words that I learned in primary school, but I heard that Portuguese speakers can understand some Spanish words, so that's primarily how we communicated lol. It was fantastic sex, and it lasted about an hour, but neither of us ended up finishing. In my third year of college, there was a girl I was casually hooking up with on the weekends. She brought her hot AF bestie with her to a party at my house once. I started chatting with her bestie and we instantly started vibing. About 20 minutes or so later I got a push from someone who was passing by the hall because the house was full of drunk people and in effect, it transferred the push onto her, which got her to lean against the wall and our faces came very close. She immediately kissed me and we started making out like two crazy drunk people, which we actually were. I then heard one of my roommates shout from across the room, "Hey man, don't do this shit here. Go to the room if you have to do it," which got both of us laughing. I asked her if she wanted to duck and she agreed, so I took her to my room. A few days later I came to know that she knew about my performance in the bedroom from her bestie, the girl I was casually hooking up with at the time, and had planned to sleep with me all along. Yes, and pretty ducking awful to be honest. We had talked online for a long time and damn, this dude was horny, and TBF so was I. If I remember rightly, he fingered me in the taxi. I'm so classy. Got down to it. He went on top and dripped sweat all over my face. It wasn't that sexy sweat you get from great passionate sex. This was totally out of shape, sweating his arse off, and there was no real need for it. We were going super hard or anything. It was super gross to be honest, and ducking killed the mood for me, but in for a penny, in for a pound. So we finished lol. The best sex I ever had was with a girl I had met on Tumblr back when it had porn. We had been sexting for a few weeks, and one night I just said duck it and told her I was driving up around where I knew she lived. She gave me her address and, after about 1 minute of watching The Office, I was ducking her mouth. Yes, met some women at the gym. They were obviously checking me out. I made the approach. Turns out they were two bisexual roommates. We went out to dinner later that night. After dinner they invited me over, and we had sex. It was great. Two bisexual women using your D as in dildo is heavenly. Several times, heck almost every time. Hubby and I do all our screening from apps, so we know when it's time to meet for the first time in person. We are getting naked within 5 minutes. I have. In college, after meeting someone at a frat party. It was overall okay. The sex was fine, but I have found that sex with someone you've taken at least a little longer to get to know is far better, more rewarding, and more satisfying for both parties. Met a girl on Tinder, talked and met her later that night, got a taxi to her house where the taxi driver told me he'd wait to make sure she was real and all that. Hands down best taxi driver ever for doing that. Slept with her pretty much in 30 minutes. As a gay guy, this is like the majority of my interactions off of Grindr. Basically it's the sex equivalent of getting fast food and then wishing you ended up getting something that was a little better. It's not bad, it's just unfulfilling. Back in the early days of the internet, 97-ish, I was talking to a guy in an AOL chat room. Of course the conversation turned to sex and our personal kinks. I ended up giving him my address and telling him I'd leave the door unlocked. I let him know my bedroom was on the second floor, right-hand side. I put on a cute nightie with no panties and went to bed. I was really nervous, it was hard to actually fall asleep, but finally I did. I was laying on my stomach with my legs slightly parted. I woke up to a hard D pushing against my arse. I started to turn around, but he firmly pushed my head into the pillow and shushed me. I spread my legs a little more and he slipped his thick black D inside me. We didn't have talking a little bit afterward, but I never did know his name. Many times. One was just a BJ from a girl I pulled up next to at a stoplight. We just pulled over to a parking lot and did the deed. A few times, I met women online and it was known to both that when we met in person, it would just be for sex. On 2 occasions, they were so hot that we ended up doing it 5 times before I went home, which meant I had to fake it with them 3 times. Those were my 2 favorites, just due to their levels of insatiability. I've had a few Tinder hookups like this, some are one and dones, but I had one where we fooled around on and off for over a year. Strictly booty call style, we got along well but we didn't take it to relationship status. She was a great lay and we communicated well in bed, so good times. A match date once. We both talked about not being in a relationship for a long time and how horny we were, and next thing you know she was riding me and I hummed her for a bareback missionary finish. Yes. A few times. Meet a girl towards the end of the night at a nightclub. Hit it off. Back to her place or my place for sex. It was a nightclub that was famous for singles in their late 20s/30s who wanted a hookup. If you got chatting to someone there, it was likely that they were single and open to a one-night stand, so that meant if you hit it off with someone you'd likely go home together. If meeting that someone was towards 2 a.m., then it was likely you would be ducking each other before 3 a.m. Yes, on several occasions. Mostly it's fine to good. Usually the first time with someone is kind of meh, I don't put much stock into it. Second and third times are better. If there's more than 3 times, they're good. We chatted a bit on a dating site. Met at a hotel. About a week later she opened the door in her underwear and we immediately went at it. We're coming up on our 9th year of marriage now. Thank you for listening to another B-Town Reddit Stories episode. Hit the subscribe button and check out our channel for more stories. Let us know your opinion about this topic in the comments.